Daniel Harper noticed the rain before he noticed anything else. It fell straight and steady, turning the street outside the cafe into a moving mirror. People passed by with quick steps and lowered heads, each one busy with their own lives. Daniel watched them the way he often did now, quietly, without judgment, without urgency. At 53, he had learned that most moments passed without meaning unless you chose to give them one. He sat alone at a small table near the window, his coffee cooling in front of him. His cafe had become part of his routine since his divorce. It was not special. That was why he liked it. No memories waited for him here. No expectations followed him through the door. He could sit, think, and leave without anyone asking why. His life had become calm in a way that looked like peace from the outside. He had a steady job as a project manager, a quiet apartment, and evenings that ended early. Friends said he was lucky. He smiled and agreed. But luck, he knew, was not the same as fullness. That afternoon, he wasn't thinking about love or loneliness. He was thinking about time, about how quickly it moved once you stopped chasing it, about how years could pass without clear moments to mark them. He wondered when he had stopped believing that small choices mattered. That was when he saw her. She sat at a corner table, far enough to feel separate but close enough to be noticed. Her coat was still on, her scarf loose around her neck. She held a mug with both hands, though she wasn't drinking from it. Her eyes stayed on the table, unfocused, as if her thoughts were somewhere far away. Daniel did not feel a sudden rush. There was no dramatic pull. What he felt was recognition. He had worn that same expression once, years ago, during the months. After his marriage ended, that quiet wait, that feeling of being present but not fully there. It was not sadness exactly. It was adjustment. He told himself to look away. He had learned to respect distance. At his age, interest came with rules. You didn't stare. You didn't assume. You didn't step into someone else's story without being invited. Then her scarf slipped. It fell to the floor beside her chair without a sound. She didn't notice. She reached into her bag instead, searching for something else, her face tense. With distraction, Daniel stood before he could overthink it. His knees felt stiff as he moved, a reminder that time did not wait. He bent down, picked up the scarf, and cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said. She looked up, startled, then embarrassed. "Oh, thank you." He handed it to her, careful not to touch her hand. It fell. "Cuss, I guess my mind is somewhere else today," she said, forcing a small smile. He nodded. "Mine too, most days." It was a simple exchange, 2 sentences, nothing more. But her smile changed slightly, becoming more real. She wrapped the scarf around her neck and thanked him again. Daniel returned to his table, his heart moving faster than before. He didn't know why. He hadn't done anything unusual. He had helped someone. That was all. Yet something felt different. He tried to read the news on his phone, but his attention kept drifting. He noticed how she sat straighter now, how she finally lifted her mug and took a slow sip. He noticed the faint lines near her eyes when she frowned at her screen. He reminded himself to stop watching. This was how misunderstandings began. This was how kindness became something else, something heavier. He finished his coffee and stood to leave as he passed her table. She stood at the same time, reaching for her bag. They shared a brief, awkward pause, then laughed softly at the timing. "Well," she said, "seems we had the same idea." "Looks like it," he replied. She turned toward the door, then stopped. Her shoulders dropped. "Oh no," she said quietly. He followed her gaze to the empty chair. An umbrella leaned. "They're forgotten." She closed her eyes for a moment, clearly tired. "Of course." Daniel hesitated. This was the moment, the line. If you could let it go, he could say nothing and walk away. He had done that many times before, choosing distance over involvement. 'Twas safer that way, but safety had also led him. Here to quiet afternoons and empty evenings. He picked up the umbrella. "Take mine," he said, holding it out. She looked at him, surprised. "I can't take your umbrella." You can, he said calmly. I live close. That wasn't entirely true, but it felt right. She studied his face, perhaps searching for a reason to refuse. Then she sighed. Thank you. Really. You're welcome. Their eyes met again, longer this time. There was no promise in the moment, no hidden message, just mutual respect. Just understanding. She stepped into the rain, the umbrella opening above her like a shield. Daniel watched her go, then turned and walked the other direction. Letting the rain soak his jacket, he did not mind. That evening, Daniel cooked a simple dinner and ate it standing at the counter. The apartment was quiet, as it always was, but something inside him felt unsettled, not anxious, awake. He replayed the day in his mind, not with regret, but with curiosity. Why had that small act stayed with him? Why did he feel like he had crossed something invisible? He realized it was because he had chosen to care. For years, he had been careful with his kindness. He had offered it politely, safely, without attachment. But that afternoon, he had acted without calculation. He had trusted his instinct instead of his fear. The next morning, he woke earlier than usual. The rain had stopped, leaving the city, washed and bright. He made coffee and stood by the window, thinking about nothing in particular. Then, without planning it, he grabbed his coat and left the apartment. He told himself he was going to the cafe because he liked the place, that it had nothing to do with her, that it was just habit. But when he pushed open the door and saw her standing near the counter, holding his umbrella, he knew the truth. She turned, saw him, and smiled. Not polite this time, but warm. I was hoping I'd see you, she said. I wanted to return this. I'm glad you came back, he replied honestly. They ordered coffee and sat together. This time, there was no pretending they were strangers. Still, they moved carefully, like people who knew the cost of rushing. Her name was Emma Collins. She had moved from Seattle after a long marriage ended quietly. Not in anger, not in betrayal, just in distance. Daniel shared his own story in simple terms. A marriage that had once been full. A separation that had taken time to accept. A life rebuilt slowly, piece by piece. They didn't speak of blame. They spoke of change. Time passed faster than either expected. The cafe grew louder as the morning crowd arrived. People talked, laughed, moved around them. But Daniel felt strangely still. When they stood to leave, he felt the familiar urge to step back, to end things neatly, to thank her for the conversation, and walk away. Instead, he said, if you'd like, we could walk sometime. Just talk. He made sure his voice carried no pressure. Emma considered him for a moment, then nodded. I'd like that. They stepped outside together. Air was cool, the street bright. They walked side by side, not touching, not rushing. Daniel knew nothing was certain. He knew kindness could not promise outcomes. But he also knew this being older had not taken away his ability to choose. And this time, he had chosen to step forward. Emma Collins walked home slowly after leaving the cafe, her steps lighter than they had been in weeks. The city felt different that morning. The sidewalks were still wet, and the air smelled clean, as if something heavy had been washed away. She kept thinking about the way Daniel had spoken calm, honest, without trying to impress. It had been a long time since anyone made her feel seen without asking for more than she could give. She reached her apartment and set the umbrella by. The door, it wasn't really about the umbrella. It was about the fact that someone had trusted her with something small and personal. After years of feeling invisible in her marriage, that trust stayed with her. Emma had moved to Portland to start over, but starting over was harder than she had expected. She had imagined freedom would feel loud and exciting. Instead, it felt quiet and unsure. She worked from home, filled her days with tasks, and avoided places where couples gathered. Loneliness didn't shout, it whispered. That afternoon, she tried to focus on work but failed. Her thoughts returned again and again to the cafe, to the conversation that hadn't tried to become anything else. She realized how rare that was. Daniel, on the other hand, spent the rest of his day unsettled in a different way. He had returned to his apartment and gone through his routine, but everything felt slightly off. He kept replaying the moment when Emma said she hoped to see him again. Hope was a word he had stopped using, not because he didn't believe in it, but because he had learned how fragile it could be. That night, Daniel sat on his balcony and watched the city lights turn on one by one. He thought about his past, not with regret, but with clarity. He knew, now that he had spent years protecting himself from disappointment, he had confused caution with wisdom. Age had taught him many things, but it had not erased his need for connection. The next few days passed quietly. Neither Emma nor Daniel rushed to define what had happened. They exchanged a few messages, short and thoughtful. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. They met again on a Saturday morning and walked along the river. The path was busy, filled with joggers and families, but they stayed close enough to hear each other clearly. They spoke about books, travel dreams they never followed, and the strange feeling of becoming someone new later in life. Emma shared how her marriage had ended without a clear reason. They had simply stopped choosing each other. Daniel listened without interrupting. He didn't try to fix her story. He respected it. Daniel spoke about how he had once believed love was built only on effort, not understanding. He admitted how long it had taken him to forgive himself for staying too long in something that no longer fit. There was no sadness in their voices, only honesty. As the weeks passed, their walks became a habit. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they walked in silence. Both felt natural. Daniel noticed how Emma smiled more easily now. Emma noticed how Daniel stood a little taller, as if he was slowly stepping back into himself. One evening they sat on a park bench as the sun dipped below the trees. The air was cool and the city felt far away. Emma turned to Daniel and said, "I used to think kindness was something people did when they wanted something back." Daniel nodded. "I used to think that too. And now?" she asked. "Now, I think kindness is what's left when we stop trying to protect ourselves so much," he said. Emma looked at him for a long moment. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also caution. They both understood how easily moments could be misread. Neither wanted to rush ahead of their feelings. Life tested that patience sooner than expected. Emma received a call from her ex-husband. One afternoon, he wasn't unkind, but the conversation stirred old emotions she thought she had buried. Doubt returned quietly, asking questions she didn't want to answer. That night she canceled her plans with Daniel, claiming she wasn't feeling well. Daniel sensed the distance immediately, but didn't push. He remembered how overwhelming old ties could feel. Instead of asking questions, he sent a simple message: "I'm here when you're ready." That message stayed with Emma longer than the call had. Days passed before they met again. When they did, Emma apologized for pulling away. Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me explanations," he said. "You're allowed to take your time." That was the moment Emma realized what made this different. Daniel wasn't trying to claim space in her life. Kay was offering it back to her. They began to understand each other more deeply after that. They shared fears they hadn't spoken aloud before. Fear of becoming invisible, fear of trying again too late, fear of disappointment. But alongside fear grew something steadier: trust. One night, during a quiet dinner at Emma's place, the power went out during a storm. The room filled with shadows and the city went silent. They lit a candle and laughed softly at the timing. There was no tension in the moment, only closeness. Daniel said, "I know we haven't named this." Emma nodded. "I don't think we need to yet." They sat there listening to the rain, letting the moment be enough. As months passed, their connection deepened without losing its gentleness. They supported each other through small struggles, celebrated quiet wins, and learned how to stand beside each other without leaning too hard. Emma began to feel stronger in her independence. Not because she was alone, but because she was respected. Daniel felt lighter, as if he had set down a weight he didn't know he was carrying. One afternoon, they returned to the cafe where they first met. The same window, the same sound of cups and conversation. Emma smiled as she noticed the table, where she had once sat alone. Funny how one small moment can change direction, she said. Daniel nodded. I almost walked past you that day. Emma looked at him. I'm glad you didn't. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand, not with urgency, but with certainty. It was a simple gesture, but it carried meaning. Emma didn't pull away. They didn't talk about forever. They didn't make promises they couldn't keep. What they shared was grounded in the present, shaped by experience, strengthened by choice. Daniel understood now what being older truly meant. It wasn't about having fewer chances. It was about knowing which ones were worth taking. Emma understood too. Kindness wasn't weakness. It was courage. And together, they chose it again and again, one quiet, meaningful moment at a time.